On May 25th, 2025, Lori Vallow Daybell filed a motion with the court to disqualify Judge Justin Beresky from her case in Arizona, where she's being charged with conspiracy to commit attempted murder against her former nephew, Brandon Boudreaux. Lori previously made a verbal request for the judge to recuse himself.
I've ruled on the motions as required by law.
Without any kind of a conclusion of law in them, just denied. Does that not show a bias and a prejudice against one single person?
All right, are you done?
Are you not going to recuse yourself?
No, I'm denying your motion. Anything else?
One thing we can't deny is that Lori Vallow Daybell is tenacious. So having the judge deny this verbal motion, she went ahead and filed an official written motion with the court. Because she's asking for the removal of the judge currently serving on her case, the motion has to be heard by the chief magistrate at Maricopa County. That was Judge Green. Let's listen now as Lori tries to manipulate this new judge into getting Judge Beresky removed from her case. She uses her sweetest tone of voice, and she tries to sound as professional as she can in order to get what she wants.
The court's, this is the oral argument on Ms. Daybell's motion for change of judge for cause. The court's in receipt of and has reviewed motion to disqualify judge. This was filed on May 20th, and the state's response to defendant's motion to disqualify judge. Ms. Daybell, I've read your motion. In summary, the way I read it, you're asking for the court to remove Judge Beresky for cause under Rule 10.1. You cite several reasons, specifically that he's denied various motions. You mentioned facial expressions. You mentioned a belt and his not allowing you to remove it. You assert that he violated your speedy trial. There's a mention of religious persecution and an allegation of personal bias. So you're going to get, and then the state's response is that simply that the defendant does not establish judicial bias, appearance of bias, or fundamental error. Of course, under Rule 10.1, the court is evaluating whether or not Judge Beresky can be fair and impartial and whether he can conduct a fair and impartial trial in this matter. So I'm aware of the allegations. You'll have the opportunity to go first, then I'll allow the state and to address the court, and then you'll have the last word. Whenever you're ready, Ms. Daybell.
Okay. I did file this motion in this.
I'm sorry, can you pull the microphone? I'm sorry.
Sorry. I did file this motion in this affidavit after several attempts to, I made an oral motion with Judge Beresky and asked him to recuse himself because of the bias and prejudice that I had seen during our last trial and throughout the whole entire time that he has been the judge over all of these cases. And he refused to do so. So I thought I needed to put it in writing and put all my points in that I felt like were causing him to be biased and prejudiced against me, and that obviously you've read it, so you've seen all the different things that I put. There was an actual comment during trial when I was cross-examining one of the witnesses where he said to me directly after an objection from this state that I was comparing myself to biblical prophets, which I absolutely was not doing. And I didn't even realize it until someone showed it to me on the FTR afterwards that he had even said that, because I was in the middle of questioning the witness. And so there's several times that he made comments directly to me. I tried to address this with him directly in our last hearing on May 14th, where I asked him why he had denied every single motion that I had ever filed in the last year and a half. And he said that my motions had no merit. I asked him if my prior defense team, that he denied all of their motions, that they had no merit as well. And then I asked him, my prior defense team before that, all the motions they filed were denied, and did they have no merit at all either? And I asked him again if he would recuse himself from this case so that I could get a judge that was impartial and fair and have a fair trial. That is my right, my 6th Amendment right and my 14th Amendment right to have a fair trial, an impartial trial, and not a judge who has some kind of bias against me.
So in her statements, Lori reiterates to this new judge all of the ways in which she feels Judge Justin Beresky has shown a personal bias against her, denying every single one of the motions that she has filed in the year and a half that she has been in Arizona. And not only that, but using facial expressions that she didn't agree with and making a comment that she was comparing herself to biblical figures. Now, let's just remind ourselves for a second, Lori has filed a total of 7 motions to have this trial and her last trial completely dismissed, to have the cases dismissed. In January and February of 2025, she filed motions to dismiss on the basis of the violation of speedy trial rights. On March 18th of 2025, she filed a motion to dismiss for violation of confidential communication and the Sixth Amendment. On March 21st, she filed another motion to dismiss for prosecutorial misconduct. On April 7th, while her trial for Charles Vallow was in progress, she filed a motion to dismiss for failure to disclose exculpatory evidence and prosecutorial misconduct again. On May 9th, she filed a motion to dismiss for abuse of discretion by Judge Justin Beresky. On May 14th, she filed a motion to dismiss for non-preservation of crucial evidence. And then finally, on May 14th, at her final trial management conference, she asked Judge Justin Beresky to recuse himself from the case for his obvious personal bias, followed by her motion to disqualify the judge here. Now, I also want to point out that her complaint against Judge Justin Beresky regarding the comment that he made in trial was made in response to an objection from the state. The state was objecting to the relevance of the testimony and the relevance of the questions. Serena Sharp was on the stand, and Lori was questioning Serena about her knowledge of biblical figures.
Ms. Sharp, who are the 3 Nephites in the Book of Mormon?
The 3 Nephites? I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
In 3rd Nephi 28, the 3 Nephites, do you know who they are?
Off the top of my head, no.
You do not know who they are?
No, not off the top of my head.
Okay. In the Bible, do you know of John the Revelator?
Yes.
Do you know of John the Revelator being translated?
I don't remember that, but
You don't remember that? What about in the Old Testament, Elijah, was he translated?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to relevance.
What's the relevance?
I've been accused of being out of the scope of the LDS religion when this is exactly in the scope of the LDS religion.
All right, I guess to the extent you're comparing yourself to these biblical figures, I'll allow it.
Now, you just heard Lori Vallow Daybell tell Judge Green that she absolutely was not comparing herself to these biblical figures. But Lori said herself just now, I've been accused of being outside of the scope of the LDS religion. So she's asking Serena Sharp about these translated beings from the Bible in order to say she wasn't outside of the scope when she talked about translated beings, namely herself as a translated being. When Judge Beresky answered Lori's verbal motion to recuse himself, he did mention that he should not have made the extraneous comment regarding this objection. However, I think it's important to point out that Judge Beresky overruled the objection in Lori's favor. I'm guessing the reason that she brought it up is because she didn't appreciate the comment. The comment, however, doesn't show a bias against Lori. It was simply an explanation of why he was overruling the objection in her favor. But I guess it doesn't matter to Lori that the objection was in her favor. It only matters that Judge Beresky made a comment she didn't like.
Thank you.
Judge, just the prior defense motions almost all exclusively dealt with motions to preclude the media. Judge Beresky applied the appropriate law in finding that the media had a right to be present and tried to limit it by saying things like they couldn't focus on the defendant's papers or things like that to mitigate any of the concerns by the defendant. All of the defendant's motions that she has filed have been without legal basis. They've been appropriately ruled on, and the state's motion set the state as one have been ruled on based upon, again, legal basis. So the fact, as the court is well aware, that the defendant has had all of the motions ruled against has no basis for bias if they're all been ruled on based upon the rules of law and the rules of evidence. So we see nothing that the defendant has provided here that would rise to a level to preclude or recuse Judge Beresky from this case.
Thank you.
Now, listen as Lori completely changes her tone of voice to the sweetest, kindest possible voice she can use with this judge. She really turns on the charm here.
Ms. Daybell, you can have the last word.
Yes, also, along those lines, Your Honor, that's one thing that I asked Judge Beresky, is that he has denied all these motions with no finding of fact and no conclusion of law. I said, what is the finding of fact and conclusion of law? These are just denied, 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 denied. He's also denied several attempts for me to try to ask the state for discovery that he's just denied outright. And then as I keep filing more and more, as I find out what we don't have and I ask for it, I'm continually, even to last week, getting brand new discovery with brand new Bates numbers, stuff that they realized they never even had before that hadn't been turned over. And I've been asking Judge Beresky for these items for 1.5 years. And I'm getting them 1 week before trial. We start picking our jury today. We're supposed to be doing our strikes today. And along those lines, I had this motion about the RAC belt that I had asked him about since we went through this whole trial, and there was times when the belt didn't fit around me, so it fell out of my clothing. We had to stop trial and I had to go fix it. And that is what MCSO recommended, that if that was too burdensome, that they would put an armed guard in the back. And because of the media that Judge Beresky has let into every single one of the hearings and the trial, that they already have an armed guard back there. So it wasn't going to cost the state any more money. It wasn't going to cost anything if he just had them remove the belt and went over the security that the MCSO actually recommended.
I want to pause here to again remind you that Lori's argument that MCSO required that she either wear a rack belt or have an armed guard, her interpretation of that recommendation is incorrect. MCSO recommended that Lori wear a rack belt and that if necessary, there could also be an armed guard there. So here she is trying to gaslight another judge into the idea that she didn't even need a rack belt. Not that that's relevant to what the judge is hearing in the first place, but Lori is trying her tactic on every possible person that she can to get as many people to adopt her narrative as she can. This is very typical of narcissistic people to co-opt everyone onto their side. She tells the same story to everyone and she sees who buys it. If they buy the story, she knows they're an ally and she can use them in the future.
Every single thing that I asked for has been denied. I feel like he does have a personal bias against me. And all I'm asking for, I went through a whole trial with him, even thinking he was biased against me before the trial started. I filed for a new motion because it came to our attention through the media. The media sent Judge Beresky a clip of one of the jurors saying that he found out about my prior convictions beforehand, before his deliberations. And this is the same exact juror who was brought in twice during trial by Judge Beresky, where he had to admonish him for, one, being on his phone, and two, talking to one of the other jurors about the case. And now he's saying, well, he went on another media thing and said that he took it back. He took back what he said. So I'm not going to give you a new trial, and nothing was done about it. He refused to call them in and have a hearing and put him on the stand under oath and ask him if he found out this information prior to deliberations. It was very confusing, and everything is just outright denied. I want to go to trial. I want to have a fair trial, as fair as possible. I don't feel like I can do that with Judge Beresky, and I would like to be appointed a new judge who wouldn't know anything about the case and be fair and as impartial as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I've considered the written motion and the response, and certainly your comments today from both sides. Ms. Daybell, I find that the fact that you disagree with Judge Beresky's substantive legal rulings is not a valid basis under Rule 10.1 to grant your motion and give you a new judge. The standard in 10.1 is, has he demonstrated he can't be fair and impartial? And the fact that his rulings have not gone your way is not a valid basis to suggest that he can't be fair and impartial. Unless there's some other allegation of bias that's been demonstrated, I don't find on this record that it has been demonstrated. I certainly understand your frustration with the way that the rulings have come out, and it sounds like the way that they came out with prior counsel, but the things that you have cycled through at length in your motion to disqualify, I've considered all of them. Whether or not he should have ruled differently, for example, the example you gave with the juror, or with making findings of fact and conclusions of law in writing, some of the issues you have, if you have concerns about his substantive legal rulings, you can file a motion to reconsider, or you can take them up on appeal. You can file a special action. You have a number of legal remedies at your disposal where you can make those arguments, but they're not grounds under Rule 10.1 to get a new judge. So I am going to deny your motion. Again, as for your concern about his substantive legal rulings, you can address those concerns in a different way, but it would not be under a 10.1. And on this record, I don't find that he's demonstrated that he can't be fair and that he can't be impartial. I also wanted to address the comment that he made that you illustrated. That comment alone doesn't demonstrate that he can't be fair and impartial. I'm not exactly sure of the context where he made it, but it sounds like he let you ask a question with regards to religion, and that was his decision. But again, I don't think even that demonstrates that he can't be fair or impartial in this case. All right, so I'm denying the request to disqualify Judge Beresky under Rule 10.1. Is there anything else from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Anything else, Ms. Daybell? Nope. Thank you. We are adjourned.
I want to rewind and replay Lori's final word in this hearing, because if you notice, there is a huge change in her tone and her demeanor, going from the sweetness of her arguments that she's making to the judge to after the judge rules and denies her motion. Listen carefully.
Ms. Daybell? Nope. Thank you. We are adjourned.
All we get from Lori is a subdued nope. Now, the judge did mention that Lori could file motions to reconsider if she wants the judge to rule a different way, or that she could take up these concerns on appeal. So it'll be interesting to watch and see if Lori takes this magistrate's advice, or if she just considers herself defeated and drops the matter. I, for one, would be very surprised if we don't see an appeal from Lori, and if we don't see, in fact, these very things mentioned in her appeal. Till next time. Thanks for joining me. Hello, beautiful human. Thank you so much for watching today. Would you do me one quick favor and take a second to subscribe to the channel? It's the best way that you can support the channel for free. In addition, if you're interested in even more exclusive content, you can join the community at the link below. Thanks so much for being here.